Hi everyone, welcome to our walkthrough of our summer exhibition, Whose Land Is It? The show opened on the 8th of July and runs until the 19th of September. The three photographers that we're featuring are James Tyler, Atong Atem, and Amanda Williams. All three artists are based in Australia and in their own ways are all working in or with or around the idea of landscapes through photography. We were interested in looking at Australia as a space because we wanted to look at how a particular country and different cultures and different communities are responding to very real and present threats of climate change and seeing how visual culture and photography is responding to that. Here we are in Gallery 1, and this is the project by James Tyler called The Economics of Water. James is interested in how environments and communities intermingle and mix. And the project that we're looking at here is specifically looking at the Murray-Darling Basin, which is in southeastern Australia. The project is about environmental damage to land and to riverbeds. So this river was originally maintained and looked after by Aboriginal communities. They were the stewards of the land and they passed on knowledge between themselves and also over generations. The land was then taken out of their hands, and what we're looking at is the impact of that loss of knowledge. So we're looking at devastation of land and riverbeds because that knowledge was taken away from the land itself. This is a direct result of land and water and resource mismanagement. But also on top of that, what we're looking at is the direct impact of extreme changes to weather patterns. And in this example here, we're talking about drought and kind of severe drought over extended periods of time. And so this is really a worsening situation. So the land was taken out of the hands of the original holders, and that impact was further intensified by the climate itself. So what previously would have been a source of food and water and leisure and a social space is now not able to function in those ways because of the role and the nature of the people who've taken over that land. What we can also see here is like a widening gap between people and the land and people and knowledge and the land as well. What I tend to think when I'm looking at the particular gold structures and spaces and shapes that are laid over the images, is that it's talking about this idea of covering up that loss, or covering up knowledge rather, or thinking about the loss of knowledge. But I think on the other hand as well, it's looking at the richness and the wealth of the knowledge of the original land and the landholders themselves. So the way that I think about the project and the way that I think about what the gold is doing is that it's approaching the land and the river and the project from two angles. So we're thinking about covering up elements, so covering up the original use of the land and covering up that knowledge, but also thinking about the richness of that as well, and thinking about what's left in the middle and what we can do with the land that remains. The shapes don't have specific meaning, but they are specific to the images that they're paired with. I think there are also elements here of extractive labor. So thinking about the land being overworked and also thinking about the people who have been overworked. So there are ideas here around depletion and using and overusing elements and natural resources until they're no longer valuable. There's also a question here around power struggles. So how is it possible to steal or take land from certain communities? And why is this allowed? And how does this keep happening? Here we'll move into Gallery 2. And this is work by Atong Atem. Atong is showing two projects in this space, and one of them is called Monstera obliqua, which we can see on the left and right-hand sides, and Photo Weavings, which is on the far wall. Atong made this work during lockdown in Australia, and she was going on local walks in her neighborhood. And on these walks, she was collecting materials and ephemera and different objects, mementos, while she was on these walks. She collected these objects and either put them into the camera or photographed them and re-photographed them in her studio, so out of that natural space. She printed those photos and then either placed the objects back on top and rephotographed them, or in other instances, as we'll talk about later in photo weavings, she would scan them as well. I think there's something interesting here around the idea of maybe mapping or cataloging or documenting our surroundings, particularly during lockdown, but I think just overall in general as well. So really taking the time to focus on our very immediate surroundings and to think about what those objects are doing in their natural environments, but also what happens to them when we take them out of those environments, take them into a studio and photograph them. Like many photographers and visual practitioners, Atong is really interested in thinking about the camera as an object for recording. So that goes back to the idea of sometimes placing objects into the camera body and then continuing to photograph as well. It also helps as a way of activating those objects that she finds on her walks. And from placing them, from taking them from the ground and putting them into the camera is just a way of changing their role and thinking about the fluid nature that we can um, put on top of objects in terms of being able to move them in and out of different environments and change their original meanings. There's also something here around making sense of lockdown. So building up layers of objects or building up layers of different meanings is just a way of showing how adaptable we are or sometimes have to be. Atong was also making use of some prints that she already had. And so again, going back through archives, looking at work that already exists, and thinking about how that work can be renewed or rejuvenated through different ideas and through new ideas. What we have here on the back wall are two images from the series called Photo Weavings. These are portraits that Atong has taken. She then cuts them up and weaves them again, and then re-photographs them, and in some instances scans them or disrupts that scan while it's happening. So we end up with these kind of fractured, kind of glitching images that are almost recognizable, but slightly difficult to read as portraits. I think what I really like about this project is that it's talking about, or it makes me think of certain discomfort of being in the landscape or a certain discomfort of being in the self or being in the body. So again, it's this idea of looking at something that is faintly recognizable and just thinking about how we fit into different spaces and the amount of change that we make ourselves go through to make ourselves flexible or adaptable to fit into a new space or a different environment. So what does it mean when we are molding in or blending in or taking up space in different environments? Atong is also interested in digital spaces as a way of allowing for that. So thinking about the landscape that naturally exists or spaces that naturally exist, and then creating a kind of digital space that is much more comfortable for us to be in if that natural environment doesn't already exist. I'll just go around the corner here. And in the window of the gallery, we have a few more of those photo weavings. And this time they're printed onto fabric. And again, that's just a nice way of playing with the medium and playing with the output of photography. So in this work, Atong is working with physical prints and cutting them up using digital techniques and technologies. So for example, scanning them and then outputting them onto something very tactile, like this textile here. And we'll go upstairs into our third space. And this is a project by Amanda Williams. And Amanda is interested in the link in the relationship between feminism and the landscape. So here is a series of cave-like structures that Amanda has been photographing for a while. And the way that she approaches this is that it's a very kind of physical process. So she is walking through landscapes and walking through nature for hours on end and carrying her camera with her and is looking for particular areas of interest. So it's a very kind of, yeah, it's a very physical approach. She then she's shooting on an old yashica, and what she does is she's photographing these cave-like structures and then printing them onto expired paper. So she has a huge range of expired papers that some of them are like a few decades old. She has an incredible archive of this. And what happens is that obviously over time, the paper begins to fog, or the silver content starts to change a little bit with time. And what happens is that she'll print the same negative onto different types of paper. And she's interested in seeing the physical response to the paper in response to the physical aspect of the landscape. There's also something here around maybe time travel. So the idea of moving back through time as a way of moving back through sheets of paper in these paper boxes. I think there's also something interesting about this passage of time for humans against nature. Our lifespans are incredibly short in comparison to other living organisms in the natural world. And we can only base our opinions or base our experiences or perspectives based on that lifespan. But these caves have existed for millennia, and we are capturing just the tiniest of fragments of their existence. I think there's something really clever about being present, but also being able to explore what's happened previously in history, and also kind of speculating or thinking about what might happen to these structures in the future. The history of landscape photography is quite particular in that it is very much about, or was about, taking and making photographs and documenting landscapes and really dominating nature in a way. So thinking about that hero's journey of going out and setting out on an adventure, often by themselves, and it becoming this kind of feat of endurance and bringing back these images as if they're trophies. That link between feminism and the landscape for Amanda is very much around undoing or unsettling that narrative and thinking about photography as being a way of conquering the landscape, but more about sitting alongside it or being more empathetic towards it or understanding the very kind of symbiotic relationship that we have with it. Amanda is actively inserting herself into the landscape here. And this is an approach or a way of working or a type of working that reflects itself across a range of her projects as well. So working in a very kind of slow, long-term capacity and really thinking about what her impact is on the nature or the environment when she's photographing it as well. So that's the end of the walkthrough. And I think some of the themes that are coming out in the projects here are around having an empathy for the landscape and the environment around us, whether that's understanding or recognizing the people who might come before us or might have more knowledge about that space, or even understanding how some people might be more comfortable or less comfortable in our natural world, and thinking about what we can do or what visual culture and photography can do as a way of creating new spaces that are more comfortable for people, as well as thinking a little bit more about the history that we're working with when we think about landscape photography and thinking about where we've come from and also thinking about the changes that we want to make in the future of landscape photography as well.